Fran Kranz, you wrote and directed Mass, which is the story of two pairs of parents still in the middle of their grieving in the aftermath of a school shooting. And it's your feature writing and directing debut. So, what inspired you to tell this particular story?
Well, I was a new parent at the time of the Parkland shooting, and February 2018. And I was pretty overwhelmed by the event, and in ways that I hadn't been before in the past, with some of these shootings and these tragedies that happen with some frequency in our country. And I was deeply affected by this, and I sort of quickly sort of assumed it was because I was a new parent, but it was a little confusing as well, and I kind of felt this need to look deeper into it and why I was so rattled by it. So I started, buying books and doing research about the subject. And over these sort of the next couple months, I started to make these other kind of realizations about my life and sort of things I had always been interested in or fascinated by or inspired by. And going back into when I was a teenager and in high school and college, learning about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa and the stories that came out of the amnesty hearings there, bringing families of victims with perpetrators, or even meeting families of the perpetrators in this effort of restorative justice to sort of heal and reconcile and move forward as a country, not live with this continued kind of pain and resentment. And I thought it was incredible, but I thought also that I did not know how or if I could participate in something like that. At that age, I thought, no, I would need retribution. I would need punishment. And these things kind of circled back, I guess, as a new parent some 20 years later, in the wake of these shootings, or particularly what happened at Parkland. I started to think about those things again, and what would happen, and what would happen in my life, and what would I do? And so I started focusing on these meetings. I found these meetings of these parents meeting one another, families of victims and families of perpetrators. And it became clear to me that I wanted to tell a story about pain and how we live with it, but also what we can do with it. What do we do with it, and how do we move forward with it? So that long answer, but that's kind of the genesis of the film.
What's interesting about it from a storytelling perspective is that you have the story that takes place in this one room for the most part with these parents, but they're discussing so much of events that took place before that led them to that point. Like, how much outlining, and sort of backstory building were you doing before you could even get to the writing of those characters in that room? Like, was that a lot of pre-preparation?
A lot of research. I really tried to immerse myself in true accounts, these real efforts of restorative justice. The TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. You can find real transcripts, and but a big source for me was Desmond Tutu's book, No Future Without Forgiveness, and then there's the Forgiveness Project, which you'll get a lot more details or actual things people say to one another in these situations. The meetings between parents in the wake of these shootings are very private. Obviously, there's not a great amount of detail. So I tried to really immerse myself in real accounts. Meanwhile, I was doing this other kind of research, just about shootings in America and abroad. And the subject of the movie, what I really was interested in is how you get through a conversation like this, and what is that conversation. So it was always important to me. It was very clear from the beginning. It has to be real time. It has to be uninterrupted. I didn't want flashbacks. I didn't want music and inserts, or I didn't want to be poetic about it. I wanted to sort of embrace the awkwardness and difficulty of real life and the challenges that would present. And we're going to, in the sense that we're going to enter this room with them, and we're not going to leave until they leave. and we're going to have to suffer through it, so to speak, and sort of endure the difficult moments. And thinking that, look, life in many ways, in my mind, life seems filled mostly with ordinary moments, and then kind of sprinkled or sometimes interrupted by more extraordinary moments. And so while the meeting is incredibly emotional, I wanted to embrace the ordinary also, and tell that story, that grief is something that we sort of live with, and we live with it in the ordinary times as well. And so it was important to me to keep this in real time. But also, as far as the information, when you said this takes place 6 years later, or at some time later, and in the film it's 6 years, there was a lot of attention and sort of effort, and a big challenge in the writing process was always trying to make sure or pay attention to what do these people know already, and what would how would that affect what they want to say or what they need to hear or need to say in this room. And so I would, and with each draft, usually catch something to say, well, wait, this guy, they would already know this, I think. So why would he say this? Or if she does know this, then she might interrupt and say, I don't want to hear this. I don't need to hear this. I know that. And so there was, in a lot of edits, there would just be a lot of that. There'd be a lot of interjecting. No, I know this. I don't need to, which I felt sort of added to the kind of naturalism of the conversation, but also the frustration. It was another, getting actors involved to do readings was a huge help in the sense that even as an actor myself, I think you get immersed in the writing process and you can lose track of these things. So it was great to have actors come on board, even just for a read through at someone's home, and hear from them. This felt funny to me because wouldn't I know this, or isn't this information one might gather from a police report, or those kind of things. And so it always was this evolving, kind of organic conversation in the sense that finding the truth and the real sort of authenticity of what's known and what's important, I guess.
And this being such a character, an actor-driven film and story, like how did your background as an actor kind of affect your writing process, inform it, influence it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to do it. I'm so curious to hear, from the other writers, and I obviously Rebecca's an actor, and there was this improvisation, right? And it sounds like listening to them, it's sort of what you do. I guess that's what you do. You sort of live these parts and hear them and visualize them. And so much of it was sort of improvisation. I know as an actor, even when you kind of have, a small role, right? There's no small roles, only small actors, or what they say. And this idea that you create your own backstory, you believe in the person, you're a three-dimensional person. And even if you're the bad guy, I'm not the bad guy, these kind of ideas. So, I wrote particularly the 4 leads as 4 protagonists. I really fought their case, so to speak, or really tried to plead their case and give them dignity and speak for them as honestly and as compassionately as I possibly could. And this goes for the parents of the shooters, where that might be perhaps more challenging. I really tried to fight for each of these people, which was a crazy making process, right? Because I would hit obstacles in my own conversation and kind of arguing with myself and not knowing how to sort of, who was right. And that was sort of probably the major challenge of the writing process. And I would just sort of surrender to it and say, you know what, I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to go back to the research. And, I'm really fascinated by this sort of account that I read, or I heard, I read about a family exchanging photographs, and I thought, man, what could that have been like? That I don't know if that's a good idea. That sounds really sensitive and painful. So I would write that out. I would have my characters sort of do that exercise. And I started to have these kind of, puzzle pieces of a conversation. I sort of knew what I wanted this to be in essence. But I started to try and piece together these sort of somewhat separate scenes of dialogue into a larger conversation. and basically embracing or hoping for that in real life, there often are forced segues and difficult conversations. Sometimes you reach impasses and you're not sure how to get through it, and there are awkward silences or contradictions or redundancies, and you sort of push through in an effort to get to a better place, and trying to sort of welcome that difficulty and sculpting the conversation. That was kind of an 11th hour realization in the writing process, where I thought, it's okay if these pieces don't seem to fit. We'll make them fit because these characters would make that effort. They would push through the awkwardness because they're so desperate and feel such urgency in their need to be there and heal and find meaning.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the film, and thank you so much for talking to me about it.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a pleasure. Appreciate it.